So I'm going to talk about how do we tackle the hard stuff in life? How do we start to work on a problem that feels impossible? Immediately, my brain is thinking of reactive behaviour because for a lot of people, this is a massive hurdle. Trying to teach our dogs not to be reactive feels like an impossible mountain to climb. People have tried so many different things. But it doesn't have to be reactive behaviour. It could be anything. It could be teaching a recall. It could be teaching a dog how to answer the front door. It could be teaching them how to cope better when the hoover's on. It could be anything. But when we start to try and tackle a behaviour problem that feels hard, what we really need to do is we need to try and simplify it. Because trying to rehabilitate a dog that's terrified of other dogs is a big problem, but there are lots of little baby steps in between that we can simplify this problem, and we can help our dogs. So there are some things that we need to consider when we're going to try and make something simple. The first thing is can our dog do the behaviour we would like them to do, but in a different situation? So for example, this could be at the dog groomers. You know, some dogs will let a dog groomer work on them all day. They'll let them shave and clip and trim nails and do all that kind of stuff. And they're brilliant at the dog groomer. The dog groomer has no idea that you're having problems with this at home. But at home, you can't groom your dog at all. He's reactive. Maybe he's a little bit aggressive. He's very defensive, wriggly, all those kinds of things. So you can't groom your dog at all. Your dog groomer has no bother at all. Maybe there's a different situation. Perhaps your dog is great on their walk, but not at home, Maybe they can meet strangers in the park, but if you invited somebody in through your front door, then they're not going to be able to cope with that. That having somebody come into their house is too much for them. But on a walk, they're happy to meet everybody. They're a social butterfly. They'll go up to all the people in the park. They can be off their lead. They get treats. They get pets. This is not unusual. Maybe for separation anxiety, for example, maybe your dog can be left in the car and they'll be happy enough sitting in the car while you go shopping, while you go to the gym, while you visit a friend. They maybe just lie there, for a couple of hours while you're just busy doing things, but you couldn't leave them at home for a second. They just couldn't cope at home. So what can your dog do that is similar but not in the situation you're trying to work on? Start to think about that. And start to think about how do we make that a real thing for your dog. So how do we start to reward that? How do we start to build that into your training? I think about how can we slow things down? Keeping things slow keeps excitement levels low, or anxiety levels low, or frustration levels low, or aggression levels low. Slowing everything down really flattens out that curve. Whenever your dog is suddenly faced with something that's really exciting, their excitement levels peak really fast, and then you have to work to get them back down again. But when you slow an experience down, then that peak is much less. It takes longer, so they stop build up to it gently, and it flattens and then it comes back down again. But keeping them nice and calm could prevent a problem from happening. So this can be the case with, for example, meeting another dog. Maybe your dog's not very good at meeting another dog, but when we slow them down, we make them walk nice and slowly, their brain stays in their thinking brain more. The reactive brain is less likely to kick in because we're not spiking that excitement, that reactive emotion, and we're keeping them calmer. So does that help? So if you can't do it differently in different situations, think about maybe whether you can slow the whole experience down for him, and maybe that will help. Walking a dog very slowly is brilliant for keeping them calm in general. And actually dogs walk better to heal when they're walking slowly. So this is a useful thing to try. Maybe that doesn't work for you. Perhaps you need to make more distance. So with the reactive dog, maybe slowing down didn't work for them, but maybe finding out where they're starting to go into that kind of threshold, where that excitement curve is just starting to build up, and then you make some distance and you keep yourself well away from that trigger. Maybe they can cope with that at 20 feet away or 30 feet. Maybe they need to be 100 feet away, but how do we make them cope? That distance will really help. Perhaps we need to break things down. So maybe that creating distance didn't work for you. Maybe there isn't a situation you can do it in. Maybe slowing him down didn't work, but perhaps breaking things down into smaller steps is the answer for him. So let's think about answering the front door. There's actually a huge amount of steps involved in answering the front door calmly. So perhaps he needs to learn a place command. Maybe he also needs to learn sit. He also needs to learn stay. We need to desensitize them to the sound of the doorbell. So again, it stops that massive spike of excitement when he hears it. Once that excitement has spiked, and then you try and teach him his place and his sit and his stay, you know, you might as well not bother, because while he's up in that massive excitement spike, he's not paying attention to you at all. So desensitization to the doorbell sound means that he doesn't get so excited in the first place. This other stuff starts to work. For the front door, he'll also need to learn how to greet people in a calm way. Maybe you teach him to sit to get attention from people. So there's a huge amount of steps in there. So you could break that experience down into lots of little steps, work on them all one at a time, all in little separate things, separate training sessions. And then one day we start to build them all back together again. So maybe we try a place, a sit and a stay at the front door without the doorbell, you know, and then you build the doorbell in, and then you once you've got them nice and calm and somebody comes in, then then they'll be able to respond to that, you know, greeting that you've taught them as well. So breaking it all down and then building it back up together again once all of the little component parts have been mastered. Maybe you're not trying to answer the door, perhaps you're trying to desensitize your dog to the Hoover or the TV. Does it help to turn the sound off or the picture off? Maybe the Hoover they can cope with the sound on but not moving, or maybe they need the sound off and the Hoover is moving. Maybe even plugging it in as a trigger. So you could break that down into little steps. And then again, once he's very calm and he can cope with each individual steps, you just build them back in together again. So this is basically how we go about tackling, you know, those big problems in life. And whatever it is that you're working on at the moment, just think about how you could break that down and how you can make it easier. And it doesn't matter how you make that easier. As long as it's kind and it's gentle, perhaps having a different person walking your dog, you know, maybe your dog will walk past other dogs, no problem, with your son. But when you do it, you know, he's a nightmare, you know. So let's create a training plan that your son can do, that your dog will find predictable and he can understand and is rewarding. And then when he's very good and he's accepting that from your son, and he's finding that very predictable, then you bring that training into what you're doing. So then you copy that plan across. The plan is already familiar. He's already done it. He can cope with it. And it's only just one more step. So break it down, make it easier. What are you working on right now? Think about how would you break that down to make your training easier. Let me know how you get on in the comments. Take care for now. Bye-bye.